Here are 7 tips for first-time home buyers. If you have not watched my previous video, that is me taking you through the beginning of the buying process to the very end for a very first time home buyer. And these are just additional tips that you may need to know for a first time home buyer. I am Morgan Turner, your Real Estate and local expert and realtor. Let's get into the video. So the first tip is getting approved with a mortgage. In the other video, I spoke about what getting approved is. What does that look like? What does that even mean? In this video, I'm just gonna tell you a tip that getting approved for a mortgage. When you go to apply, they're going to pull your credit score so that they can know exactly what you're going to get approved for. You have 14 days to try out different lenders and talk to different lenders to see what their best product is for you so that your credit score doesn't have to get a hard pull again. So one inquiry can go across multiple different loan officers. So that is nice to do. You want to be able to interview a few people, see what's your best options are. You have to do that within 14 days to get one credit pull. Another one that I always have conversations about is, and I feel like this is really not talked about enough, is costs outside of just your closing costs and down payment. When you go under contract on a house, you're gonna have about 3 upfront costs before you even get to the closing cost and the down payment on your home. And that's just something that you need a budget for. So earnest money is one of them, and I'm not gonna go into the finer details of earnest money, but that is usually in Ohio, it is 1% of the purchase price. So, and it depends, if it's under 300,000, you're usually you can do like $500 to $1,000 for earnest money, and it's not really looked down upon. But if you're over 300,000, that's when the 1% rule kind of falls into play. But I'm not going to get into what earnest money is because it's just kind of you can kind of look it up for yourself. It's basically just a good faith deposit. But basically that is due usually and typically within 3 days after you go under contract. Now in different markets, it may be due before you even put the offer in. I've heard that before. So earnest money in the Dayton market is usually 1% of the purchase price. Unless it's under 300,000, you could get away with a $500 to $1,000, a good faith deposit. Another upfront cost is inspections. These can get really pricey just depending on how thorough you want an inspection. You get your general inspection, and that's usually about $400 is typically what I see for a general inspection. Depending on the house size, it can be a little larger than that. It can be a little bit more expensive. But then all the add-ons that you may want. So if you want termite inspection, if you want a sewer scoop, if you want a radon inspection, if you want an additional HVAC inspection, those are all going to be add-ons to your general inspection. Now, what a general inspection is, I would not skip out on it. Let me just say that. I would not skip out on an inspection. But what an inspection is, they're just gonna look over the general of the house. They're gonna look up for safety, habitability, and structure. I've talked about this in my last video, but that is usually typically $400, and it can get more pricey depending on how large the house is and what add-ons you add to that. And then the final cost before you get to closing is going to be your appraisal. I would say that typically is around $500. It could be more, it could be a little less. I would then again just budget for, let's just say $1,000. I'm going very large. They're usually not that much, but I just don't want anyone to be in a different market, a different state, and come off of my video and be like, well, she said I only needed $500 for an appraisal, and you ended up getting a house that's way more in a different state and the appraisal is way more than $500. But in my market, that's usually what it is, about $500, if not a little bit more. So those are 3 upfront costs you need to know before you even get to your closing table for your down payment, closing costs, etc. Next up is having a good real estate agent like myself. No, I'm just kidding. Having a good realtor is really important though. Just know that, they've went through a good couple of houses. They've been through the inspections. Do they go to the inspections to learn from the inspector on different things to look for when they're now showing their buyer, things to point out on a house that looks a little suspicious? Like, is there water in the ceiling? I can see kind of the outline of the tub or whatnot. So little things like that. I also like to tell my first time home buyers that I may sound a little negative when we go through the house because they're like, oh, this is perfect. The white cabinet, it's so bright in here, and I love what they did with the decor, and it has the blonde floors and it looks beautiful. Well, when I'm going through it, I'm looking and I'm saying, hey, this water heater is at the end of its life. Hey, this plumbing looks like it's a little wonky, or hey, the electrical panel looks a little old. I'm pointing out the negative Nancy things that I'm not gonna just, go in and I'm gonna tell you the house looks beautiful, I agree. But I'm also going to point out the things that maybe you're like, oh, I didn't wanna hear that, because that's my job. I'm supposed to help you see past the prettiness. I'm supposed to help you see past what is in front of you. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I can see my kids playing here, and I can see myself cooking in this kitchen. It's like, let's see past that and look at the guts of the home. So you wanna have a real estate agent that does that for you. The next thing is, that you want a real estate agent to do is just, I talked about this on my Instagram not too long ago, is just having good relationships with other realtors is so important, because when you're writing an offer on someone's house that the listing agent has listed, you want to make sure that your realtor has a good reputation, that they get along with most people, they can negotiate a deal, we can make something work. That's really important. And I know that would be kind of a weird question as a first-time homebuyer to ask your agent, like, hey, how are your relationships with other realtors? But just look up, just do your stalking is all I'm saying. Do your research, do your stalking on their Instagram, their social media, Facebook, etc. And then another tip that just comes to mind is also, when a realtor is showing you a house, they should be able to help you kind of visualize what rooms could be utilized for. I just went through a house recently that the front room, you walk in to like a front kind of sunroom area. It looks like it was a patio that may have been enclosed. And then you go into the kitchen. It was a little functionally obsolete, I think is the word I'm looking for. It just didn't flow really well. But my job as a realtor is to kind of help you see past that. Like, I understand you think this doesn't flow well. Do you see this front door that everyone is coming into? Can you see yourself making something with that you're comfortable with everyone walking through? Hey, this kitchen doesn't have a pantry. Are you okay with that? Does this closet look big enough for you? Because when you walk through a house, sometimes I feel like you just kind of think you forget about that and you see how pretty the house looks. So just have a realtor that is helping you see past what is in front of you. The next tip I have for you is to think of long-term goals. When you're looking at the house, how long do you think you're gonna live there? I mean, and obviously we all don't know what the future holds, but are you planning to have kids at this house? Are you planning to have a spouse with you in this home? If you're single, are you planning to retire and this to be a house that you wanna end up, this is where you're going to live your life, and this is your forever home after you retire and you don't want to move again? Just think of like, how many years are you making this house work? For example, my fiance and I, when we purchased our home, it was for the both of us. And we are already kind of like thinking of what's next, what's the next house we want. So when we moved here, we weren't thinking about kids. That just wasn't our thought here. It was more just like, hey, we're wanting to live together and let's buy a house together. And this is great. This fits our needs right now. We can have friends over. We have enough room for a family to come hang out. We have a finished basement, but we're now like, hey, we have to have a kid in this first house. Just thinking a little bit further as to what you're wanting this house to hold for you in the next X amount of years in your future. Another financial tip for you is you have your closing costs and down payment ready to go. You have your earnest money, inspection, appraisal money ready to go. You're buying your furniture. You're buying your appliances if you need new appliances. You're buying paint colors and rugs and whatnot. You need to budget for your emergency fund and for your maintenance fund. When we first moved into our house, we knew that the windows were old. I would say the next year we had to replace all the windows, and that is not a cheap thing to do. But we knew they were old. We knew that was something that we were getting ourselves into, and we were okay with it. We didn't end up doing anything with the inspection on windows. We just knew that when we came in, that will be something that we need a budget for to fix in the next year or so. I've also had, clients move in and their AC unit goes out within 2 days of their living there. That's something you can get a home warranty for, but sometimes the home warranty doesn't cover the entire AC unit. That is a whole nother thing I'm not even gonna get into right now on a home warranty, but that's something that can potentially happen. And when you did your inspection, the AC unit looked good on that day of inspection, but for some reason, the day you move in, the AC goes out 2 days after you move in. Like little things like that can happen. And I see them happen, I don't want to say all the time, but more frequent than people want to believe that it happens. So just things to budget like for that, the emergency funds. And then maintenance wise, our windows were kind of a maintenance thing. And then, you know, getting your furnace maintenance, your AC unit maintenance, also the lawn care. If you're buying in the winter, what's the lawn care going to look like in the summertime? You know, do we need to put down a new flower bed? Who's going to be mowing the yard? Are we going to have to hire someone to do that? So there's just things that upkeep with a home that people forget about. You know, you, like I said, you think of all the fun and pretty things, like when you move in, what you're going to paint, all of that. But you got to think of the stuff that's not so fun too, like spending 10 grand on all new windows. Another budget thing. I mean, buying a house is a big budget thing. So, I mean, this is just things to prepare you for. Before you offer on a home, or even after you offer and you know that this house is going to be good, you can ask for the seller to prepare average price of what the utilities are. So what your gas is going to be, what your electric's going to look like, what your water bill is going to look like, how much is trash. You can ask them to prepare that for you. Sometimes on my listings, I'll actually have the sellers prepare that so that when a buyer goes to look through the house, they already know it and it's sitting in the kitchen with their average. And it also says like how many people are living at that house at that time. So, you know, a family of 2 is living there and their average water bill is X amount per month. Well, you have a family of 4. So it just helps you give a little bit more perspective on that. So that's something you can definitely ask for before you offer on a home, or even after in the inspection period, you can ask for that just so that you can start budgeting for that. Okay, and here's my last tip. Just when you're looking at homes, know if it's in an HOA, how much the HOA costs, and what the zoning restrictions are. Because HOA and zoning restrictions can say like, you're not allowed to have a shed in the backyard. You're not allowed to have a fence that's not open, or anything that looks, you know, there's just different restrictions, especially in HOAs. You have to maybe have a certain type of mailbox, or you have to have a certain type of lamp post out front, depending on how bougie the HOA is. But yeah, those are just things to kind of look for when knowing that there may be zoning restrictions. If you're wanting chickens in your backyard, you may not be able to have that in the city. It has to be further out. So, and then I also think like, if you want horses, that's something to look up, like to make sure that you're allowed to have like horses or cows, even when you're out in the rural area, to make sure that that area is not restricted from farm animals like that. So those are a few things to also look for when purchasing a home. As always, if you have any other further questions on first-time home buying or any home buying questions in general, I also list houses too. I talk a lot about buying. My name is Morgan Turner. All of my information will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Bye guys.